That's funny. With Steve's picture, it looks like he's actually here. Hope you're feeling better. That's funny. With Steve's picture, it looks like he's actually here. Hope you're feeling better.
Clerk on us.
So it looks like we're waiting for Councillor Doherty and Councillor Berman.
Berman is I believe with Counselor Berman's image up that he should be here. Counselor Berman, can you confirm?
Yes, Councillor Doherty.
I can confirm.
Perfect.
Okay, so Councillor Berman's with us.
Yes.
I think we have everyone then. I'm missing some people. Huh? One, two, three, four, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. All right, Council, it's 1:30, so I will call the special meeting of April 8, 2020 to order. And I will go through roll call before I start. Deputy Mayor Hall,
Present.
Councillor McLeod,
I'm here.
Councillor Comey,
Here.
Councillor Madigan,
Here.
Councillor Doherty. I saw your lips moved. Councillor Doherty, just unmute.
I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey,
Here.
Councillor Berman,
Here.
and Councillor Hamlin.
Here.
Good, so we have everyone. Today we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on the lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. I will look for the motion to adopt the agenda. It is moved by Deputy Mayor Hall and seconded by Councillor McLeod. Be it resolved that the content of the special council agenda for April 8, 2020 be adopted as presented. I will start with you, Deputy Mayor Hall.
Approved.
Councillor McLeod,
Approved.
Councillor Comey,
Approved.
Councillor Madigan,
Approved.
Councillor Doherty,
Approved.
Councillor Berman,
Approved.
Councillor Jeffrey,
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin,
Approved.
and that is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any declarations today, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position, please let us know. Adoption of the minutes. Moved by Councillor McLeod and seconded by Councillor Comey that the minutes of the special council meeting held March 25, 2020 be approved as presented. I will start with you, Councillor McLeod.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Comey,
Approved.
Councillor Madigan,
Approved.
Councillor Doherty,
Approved.
Councillor Berman,
Approved.
Councillor Jeffrey,
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
Approved.
And you know what? I forgot myself. So I'm going to vote to approve the agenda, and I'm also voting to approve the minutes, and then Deputy Mayor Hall.
Approved.
Good, thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions, Council? Seeing none, any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, we'll go to community announcements, and I'll start with you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I have nothing this afternoon.
Councillor McLeod,
I have nothing this afternoon.
Councillor Comey,
I would just quickly like to say, I didn't get a chance last time to say it. I'm sure we're all following the amazing programming that our library is continuing to put out to our residents during this time, particularly the children. They found really creative ways to continue with story time and crafts and ways to engage, and it's so meaningful to our residents. So I would just like to thank them and all of those participating in it so much.
thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I have a couple of announcements. First of all, Bowls for Beds that would have occurred this weekend is canceled this year, obviously, like so many other things, due to the COVID pandemic. This was and is a significant fundraiser for Home Horizons Barbara Whiter House. So they now are facing a $24,000 shortfall. Members of the community can help by purchasing a bowl. And how you can do this is for $100, you buy one of these unique bowls, hand painted by students of our elementary schools in Collingwood and Wasaga Beach. You get a tax receipt for $89. And if anyone is further interested, wants more details, they can go to homehorizon.ca. Secondly, there are a number of people in town who need groceries delivered and a host of other services. And there is now a portal on the town website to register as a volunteer. You can go to Collingwood Together volunteer database on the town's homepage to sign up as a volunteer. Just wanted to give a shout out to our public works staff and to the County of Simcoe, who've started sweeping our bike lanes and paved shoulders early, allowing those who need to get around for work, for errands, or just for exercise to do so safely on our streets. And then finally, a reminder to folks who are using our in-town trails, or the Georgian Trail, that these are for use of both pedestrians and cyclists. Cyclists should watch their speed, stay tight and to the right, and remember always that pedestrians have the right of way. Also, this would be a reminder that motorized vehicles are now prohibited on all town trails and the Georgian Trail, and that dogs are to be leashed on trails at all times. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you, sir. I thought you forgot about me. I have nothing this afternoon.
When I remember you, Bob, you, okay, never mind. Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing further. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson.
Councillor Berman, I think I jumped over you. My apologies.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
And Councillor Hamlin. Okay.
Sorry, nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Just a couple of announcements from my perspective. Again, we're heading into a long weekend, the Easter long weekend, and I want to reiterate our stay-at-home messaging to encourage our residents to stay in town and stay at home, and make sure that you abide by the social distancing restrictions if you are out in public, and make sure that you wash your hands and sanitize and cough into your sleeve. We did unfortunately have our first death in the Collingwood area at the Collingwood General Marine Hospital this past weekend. A man from Wasaga Beach in his 70s passed away, and our condolences to his family on their loss. But it was also a reminder to us that we need to make sure that we practice these safe social restrictions. It's a matter of our private health, public health, and really, as we're seeing globally, it's a matter of life and death. So please stay at home. I would like to thank our community as well for the outreach from our residents in terms of food for the food bank and personal protection equipment for the hospital. The outreach has been amazing and very much appreciated. There is a need at the hospital still. There is also a need at our seniors' retirement homes, and we want to make sure that our older citizens get the protection they need. So if you are able and have an ability to make a donation of PPEs to our seniors' homes, please do that. I also want to recognize our local businesses and individuals who have retooled to make hand sanitizer, to provide grass partitions for the hospital, to make face shields, and as well to make surgical masks. So thank you very much to everyone in the community. We can do this together. We are doing it together, and we will prevail. On a final note, some unfortunate news. Mo Galt, a local resident who was very instrumental in establishing the Special Olympics, recently passed away at the age of 78. So our condolences to her family. She very much changed our community, and it was a very noteworthy contribution by her. Moving on from community announcements, we have deputations. I have 2 deputations that were submitted in writing, so I will be reading them to council and the public. The first deputation is from John McGarry, a resident at 15 Sunset Court in Collingwood, and he writes as follows. Council, sorry to say that I believe your proposed 6-month interest-free loan program, as well-intentioned as it may be, is a very bad idea. I recognize that many businesses in town and their staffs are in very bad shape. Undoubtedly, some will not survive. However, as you know, the federal and provincial governments have announced very far-reaching programs to support small and medium businesses. And as expensive as these might be, even they will not be enough to save every business in Canada struck by COVID-19. But ultimately, these programs will be paid for out of federal and provincial taxes, i.e. by personal and business taxpayers at 2 levels. You don't need to provide subsidies paid for by a 3rd level of taxpayer. Canada's banks have also announced wide-ranging programs of loans and loan interest deferrals to assist individuals and businesses. I feel strongly that it is not within the purview of the municipality to get into the business of direct and or indirect business subsidies. This is not within your mandate as elected municipal councillors. Further, you don't have the tools or expertise to assess the creditworthiness or needs for businesses. Banks do. So you're going to be in the business of somehow assessing need and granting loans with basically the hope that they will be repaid. These will be on top of other loans that are being extended to businesses. I think I am safe in predicting that a good proportion of these will never be paid. So how will you deal with that? Do you foresee that the town will be in the business of competing with all of the other loan collectors post-COVID to recoup bad loans? Who do you think will come first in the pecking order for repayment, the town or the bank? I think I know the answer. Please think twice before you embark down this path. I implore you to vote against this issue today. John McGarry. The second is from Paul Debsky, who is the owner and operator of the Beer Bus Company. He has sent a fairly lengthy email, and I had provided to council earlier, but what I will read a couple of portions of his email. COVID-19 virus, which has put a grinding halt to the world. Notwithstanding the severity of this global health crisis, there is also an economic crisis that is spreading quicker than the virus and claiming just as many victims. I am writing to you all today to inform you of how firsthand the COVID-19 pandemic has affected our business, with the hopes that this information will help inform and inspire all of you to help other small businesses like mine. At this point, what our industry needs is not loans, but quite frankly, a bailout. Please see below for an overall of the devastating impact we have experienced firsthand, and some suggestions, comments I hope you will consider. Our sales have been crushed, dried up. We have not processed a transaction, booked a tour since May 12th. For some context, our January online sales, separate from customer bookings, were about 11K, February 13K, and this month, $1,400. Since March 12th or so, I've processed close to 20,000 in refunds and have nothing left. I am now telling customers that I can't pay them back, and I'm hoping that they will take this lightly. We started this year with a sizable reserve in line with what was reasonable given the start of the season and also some investments we made in our business, never anticipating a global pandemic. a new floor and AD system to improve our services, new uniforms for staff, and new technology. After this week, the beer bus company will be in a bankrupt position without government supports or loans. The initiatives that government have proposed and put forward to date do not help me. I applied for a BDC loan 3 weeks ago and haven't heard back. The 75% wage subsidy kicks in 6 weeks later and has a minimum amount annual payroll threshold that sadly I don't need, shy of a few $1,000s. This $40,000 loan is higher than Prime Shark that only benefits the banks and who get paid back in interest that I must earn through actual hard work. We've been left in the dust. At the same time that this is all happening, my insurance premiums have skyrocketed because I own a bus and it's a hard market. I'm looking forward to paying about $400 more a month just to maintain the status quo, i.e. owning the bus, once we can even start to think about a return to normalcy. So those are 2 deputations that we had by email. Normally we would take questions, but given that they were in writing, I will not be asking for that. The next item on the agenda is discussion. This item 7.1, COVID-19 municipal response update, and I'll look to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if I can get the slides up, I just want to sort of make a couple of introductory comments before I get into my presentation. And to begin, I just want to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to members of council and the mayor for their incredible support during these difficult times. I also want to pay tribute to our world-class public servants. We've got a number of people in this organization who have done really impressive work, and it does demonstrate what a very small team of people can accomplish within a very short period of time. So I'm very pleased with the response and the coming together of our staff and the work that they have done in the last several weeks to try and help us deal with this significant pandemic. We had a second town hall yesterday that I hosted with all of our staff across the organization, and it was an incredible attempt to try and engage people. And one thing that I found really instructive was that throughout the presentation, we had very long moments of silence, and I told staff that's okay. You know, those of us who are in the public service and many of the people who are on the front lines, they also have family and relatives, and they have a lot going on personally. So I want to recognize and pay tribute to not only our own staff, but perhaps more importantly, all those individuals who are on the front line fighting against this terrible pandemic, and we wish them the very best. I also want to say, for those of you who are celebrating Passover, to wish you a peaceful and joyous Passover, and also happy Easter. I know that Councillor Berman is under the weather, and I'm hoping that he recovers soon. And I know the passion with which he brings to council, and I hope that we can have him rejoin us soon. And so I'd like to wish him all the best. I also want to thank our residents for all the work and support that they have provided to frontline workers, and all the tributes that I'm seeing across town to our frontline workers. And I know that these individuals really appreciate the support they're getting from the community. I've got a fairly lengthy presentation again, but I don't plan on going through every single slide. So I'll just touch the highlights and the discussion that we have had a week or so ago. I think I will do my best to try not to replicate those discussions. The purpose of the presentation today is to provide you with an update on the impact of COVID-19 on the corporation and on the community, to talk to you about some of the opportunities that we have been engaging in the last several weeks, both to help the public and also the businesses, to provide you with some further recommendations on the actions we propose to take, subject to your approval, to talk a bit about the terms of reference and the membership for the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force. You would recall that council approved this task force the last time we met. And finally, to bring forward some very specific recommendations on some additional financial supports that we are proposing to recommend that we put in place to deal with the pandemic. Slide 3 basically remind us of the toll this is taking not only on the health of the global community, but also the economic impact this is having across the world. And what's standing out for me is how quickly these numbers are changing. So when I did this slide, the number of confirmed cases across the world was 1,136,851. Since then, that number has increased by almost 300,000, and the number of deaths have risen by about 20,000. So we're seeing how exponentially the number of deaths and confirmed cases are growing, not only in Ontario, but globally as well. On slide 4, I basically provide you with an inventory of the kind of things that we have done to date to try and respond to the pandemic. We have set aside up to $2.5 million in economic relief. We've also deferred tax and water and wastewater payments. And just to let you know that the interest lost in that initiative has been to date about $13,000, and about 54 properties have actually opted out of the pre-authorized payments. So this is having an impact. Perhaps the take-up is a bit slower than we expect, but the program is out there. And I encourage our residents to visit our website to get additional details on how they can access the tax deferral. And through EPCOR, they can also defer water and wastewater payments. If you don't have a pre-authorized payment, then if you don't pay your tax bill, you should be assured that the municipality will not charge you any penalty for any late payment. We also facilitated last Friday a virtual session with our business community. This was well attended. My understanding is we had over 100 members of the business community participate in this. And this was an attempt to try and provide some additional details on the various provincial and federal programs that have been announced to support the business community. The proceedings from that webinar is also on our website for those who were not able to attend to access. We also are looking at how we might be able to continue to deliver services in an innovative way to minimize face-to-face contact and to try and adhere to what we are describing as safe work protocols, both for our own employees, but also for visitors or contractors who have to access the municipality's facilities from time to time. We're doing a lot of great work, I think, facilitating requests coming through from our hospital. The CEO and I have been in constant contact, and we're trying to facilitate requests for additional equipment or to look at how we might be able to expedite or fast track approval process within the municipality to get them to do the kind of things that they are doing. Some of this is happening in real time. Others are anticipatory to try and think ahead what could potentially be the various scenarios and what processes we can put in place to ensure that those requests are dealt with in a fairly expedited manner. So that's going on, the work that they're doing is absolutely phenomenal in terms of the response. But we're trying to do our part to facilitate and support the work that CEO Holder and her team are doing at the hospital. Just continuing on that, in that vein, on slide 5, I mentioned a number of these things the last time we spoke. Since that time, and I did send out an email to councillors indicating that we have temporarily suspended part-time PRC staff and some of our library staff who are part-time and some of our crossing guards as well. These are individuals who provide incredible service to us in the past. We continue to value them and we continue to recognize their importance to our corporation. But unfortunately, due to COVID-19 and, for example, the suspension of school, we didn't feel, for example, that we need to continue to access these resources. We've also, unfortunately, had to defer hiring of seasonal support, again, because none of us know if we will be able to return to some sense of normalcy during the summer. If we do, then we'll look at the options of bringing back some of those staff. But in the meantime, we've deferred the hiring of those individuals. I spoke before about the virtual staff meeting that we're happening. We're also looking at other ways of keeping the employees within the corporation motivated and inspired. This is an important component of the future. We need to make sure all of our employees are happy and they're healthy, and that we can call on them if we need to redeploy them, not only within Collingwood, but also in our sister municipalities. For example, one of the things that we're embarked on is a skills inventory to identify those skills that some of our staff might have and could be accessed if, for example, we need them in a critical service area, or indeed we need them for a neighboring municipality or the county of Simcoe. So we're looking at a range of initiatives to ensure that we continue to keep our staff safe and healthy. We've also recently engaged and finalized a protocol with the OPP to look at how we can collaborate with them to ensure the full enforcement of municipal regulations. And Councillor Comey did speak to what's happening at the library and the moving of some of those services and programs online. I just want to mention again that the work that our public works, water, wastewater staff are doing is incredibly important. And we're constantly looking at ways of rotating staff, separating shifts to ensure that we keep those staff healthy. And as many of you would know, the province is also facilitating increasing access to water resources by relaxing some of the rules associated with the operation of these facilities. On the communications front, I mean, if you look at what we've done as an organization on the communication side, you would think that we have a team of communications experts, but I think this is a tribute of the incredible work that our communication folks are doing. Of course, Adam is our point person, but behind Adam, there are a number of other staff who are actually supporting Adam's effort. And I want to thank Adam and the work that the communication folks are doing in keeping our residents up to date. One of the things that we heard loud and clear was that the town residents and businesses are looking to us for credible information and for leadership. And I think what we're doing on the communication side, as listed on this slide, is at least an indication that we're trying to ensure that communication is provided on an ongoing basis, not only to our elected officials, but also to the general public. Social services support, I know many of you have written to me about this and many of you are concerned about it. Councillor Doherty mentioned this in her community announcement. I know Councillor Comey and others have been very active in this area as well. I want to thank you for all the emails that you've sent and all of the resources that you've allowed us to access. But here again, this is a tribute to the work that our staff have been doing. Although it's led by PRC and the team there, we've had incredible support from clerk services and other parts of the organization to get the portal live. And within about 48 hours, we got about 26 registrations. We have over 45 social services agency participating. And we also launched Rally Point. We're trying as best as we can to facilitate connection and to identify a gap and to put people in contact with each other. So we sort of try to be the glue and the conduit through which we can create that horizontality across the community to allow people to connect. So again, I want to thank staff for the tremendous work they've done in a very short period of time. I'm not going to spend any time on slide 7. We spoke about this the last time, But slide 7 is primarily a reminder that what we're doing is trying to get ready for post-COVID-19 in terms of our own procurement, so that we can quickly create some confidence in the economy by getting some of our public works project ready to deploy as soon as that is feasible from a health perspective. On the business side, again, it's an inventory of all of the things that we've been doing with our business community. And again, I want to thank Martin and his team and Adam for the support that they have put into this. A lot of this stuff is behind the scenes, so they're not stuff that necessarily the public or all of us may see, but there's a fair bit of work going on across the corporation to try and engage the business community, get a pulse of what's going on in that community, and trying as best as we can to provide them with the information and the support they need. And noteworthy on that page is the webinar that I spoke about, and also number 5 speaks to the survey that the county did, and that's an important piece of the puzzle, because it does provide us with some information that we can use to construct any kind of program that we're hoping to provide to ensure that our business community survive. And I just want to say this very quickly: if we're going to get over this, and if we're going to make a difference economically, we've got to make sure that our businesses remain strong. I think it is a sad thing to say that we may lose some of our business, but without the business community, without the economy having the resiliency to bounce back, we're going to be in this for the long haul. So we've got to look at ways of shoring up the support we provide to our business community to keep them engaged, to keep them motivated, and to keep them alive, if I can use that term, and make sure that they have the wherewithal to manage this significant gap that's currently occurring in the community as a result of COVID-19. The next slide speaks to the corporate and community response. And again, this is a tremendous tribute to the community that we have in Collingwood. Many of our businesses and corporations have responded overwhelmingly. I'm getting calls almost every day from people asking what can they do to help frontline workers, what can they do to support the work we're doing in this municipality, and what can they do to ensure that this community continue to thrive and look beyond this pandemic. The names of these companies are too numerous to mention, but from everything from hand sanitizer to PPE to using 3D printers to create masks. And when I look at this, and I was reflecting on this with some of my staff earlier today, is that this is when government is most needed. This is when government has to step up to the plate and provide leadership and support to the community. These individuals, they're not looking necessarily for a handout. They're looking for an ability to make a difference. They want to be part of the response, and they're looking to us to help them create the connections that allow them to do that. And we're trying to do our best to facilitate and make those connections as we grapple with the other challenges that we're faced as a corporation in terms of delivering services to our community. The last point on that slide is the tremendous support that the police, fire, and paramedics have been providing to our frontline workers. The drive-through was a big hit, and it's something that I understand our emergency service personnel will continue to do. And also, like I said, if you drive through the town, you can see signs all over the place paying tribute to frontline workers. Even people have lawn signs these days recognizing the important work that these people do. So again, I want to pay tribute and thank them for being there to protect us and protect our residents. The next slide, again, I know this keeps coming up from time to time, but this is the issue about emergency preparedness. And I've noted a few considerations that I'll put before council in terms of when we may decide to activate our emergency operations center. And I've listed 4 things, and since then I've added a 5th one. You know, we have to continuously monitor what's happening with our staff and how COVID-19 is impacting on them. And you know, if, for example, we find that you know, a portion of our staff are affected by this, and which could have an effect on our on the delivery of services, that might be one consideration. The spring is coming up, and you know, there are sometimes natural conditions that result in flooding and other disaster that might impact on the community. Also, we have to look at what's happening elsewhere within the sub-region, our population as well, and how affected they are by COVID-19. And then also, the 5th one I would add there is whether or not town-related facilities or other physical facilities beyond the hospital, if they are impacted or have to be used for COVID-19 related purposes. And I don't want to get into a lot of the details, but we've been having some discussions with our hospital to look at some of those scenarios and making sure that we are anticipatory and preparing for those things which we hope wouldn't happen, but we've got to be prepared. So those are some of the considerations, some of the criteria that I probably bring forward to council if we were to go to the activation of a virtual EOC. Again, I would repeat what I mentioned the last time, which is if we were to go this route, one of the challenge would be that in normal course of event, you'll have an EOC with staff being there physically. I think in this situation, what we will be looking at is a virtual EOC. The next slide provides a reiteration of what many of you would have known as a result of the last time we met, which is the economic support, and recovery task force. Just a reiteration of the membership and the mandate. I understand the mayor did circulate potential members of the task force to council, and I'm sure you know, he will take into consideration any feedback that he receives from members of council. On the next couple of slides, I just thought I should unpack a bit before we get into the recommendations. Some of the characteristics of our local economy, and you know, it's interesting that 96% of businesses in Collingwood have less than 49 employees, and over 3/4 of our businesses are solo entrepreneurs or people with no employees. So we've got a significant chunk of our local economy being driven by small business. And if you look at the numbers, we've got almost 1,000 business with just maybe 1+ employee. And we've got about 700 with between 1 to 9 employees. So large majority of our business community are small business. And this is, I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know, but small business is the engine of not only the Collingwood economy, nor the Ontario economy, but the Canadian economy. So small business is fundamental to economic recovery. And it's also needs to be an area that we target in any kind of response if we are to bounce back quicker than one would expect after this is all over. The next slide again speaks to some of the concerns that were raised by the small business. And this is a survey that was done by Simcoe County. Nothing there that would surprise any of us. Obviously, health issue continue to be number one. And then the other financial considerations would fall below that. The next slide speaks to what kind of support the business community is looking for. If you look at that, tax deferral, rent deferral, access to loans and grant, available resources, and enforcement of social and physical distancing. And if you look at that list, I think it is safe to say that the town of Collingwood has instituted perhaps 4 or 5, and the other one we will probably we will have a discussion on today. So we seem to be aligning our support infrastructure with what's the concerns by our business community. And whatever support we put in place, it's not going to be easy. Whether it's from an administration implementation point of view, we also need to look at how these programs are accessed and what are the criteria. While we don't want to make the criteria overly burdensome or onerous, we also need to make sure that we are transparent and there's accountability and transparency to the funds that we are going to potentially offer to our business community. We also have to be responsible in whatever financial support we provide. So the next slide is basically the recommendations, basically the rationale and some of the options that led to these recommendations are contained in the staff report. But basically what we're recommending is threefold. One is to provide an up to $10,000 support for any individual or any corporation who puts up money to support a COVID-related issue. So ABC Corporation, Josephine Doe, if they were to, for example, say I want to donate $5,000 to go to this charity or to go to this corporation to provide food for the vulnerable, and we can validate the veracity of the donation and the administration of it, the town will match that donation up to $10,000. The maximum limit that we have provided in the staff report is $100,000. Depending on the uptake of that program and depending on council's inclination, that amount could be higher. But if it is higher, then we'd have to come back to council for approval if that particular recommendation is approved today. So that's a matching program up to $10,000 for any individual or any corporation for any COVID-19 related support. So it could be support for personal protective equipment, or it could be support for accommodation, or it could be support for food, or it could be support for anything else that is related to COVID-19. The second one is aimed at our business community, and that is an interest-free loan of up to $10,000 to ensure that businesses have the support in the interim to be able to pay their bills. I know that the federal and provincial governments have announced a number of programs, but many of those programs are taking some time to kick in, and the run-up between now and when the cash is delivered might be weeks, potentially a month or so. So this loan program is essentially meant to provide and bridge that gap. We've got some options that we're looking at in terms of the implementation of this program. I'm not recommending that necessarily the town be the one who is responsible for the administration of the program. We have entities who are doing it in Collingwood now, and we could seek their support and their help because they have the infrastructure to do it. And we could flow the money as applications come in. This and the recommendation regarding the matching 10,000 would also be the first items for discussion by the task force to try and drill down into the details and criteria for the administration and implementation of these two programs. And the third recommendation is building on something we already have, but it is to try and build what we're describing as an integrated business portal for post-COVID-19. So this is a portal to promote buy local, stay local, again, to facilitate connections across the community and in the sub-region. And this is also where, we will put information on, what kind of public works are available, what businesses are doing, who's hiring, what kind of skills are required. It would be a one-stop business portal to help with our recovery efforts. Again, we might need to invest some amount of money to begin to build that portal, but I don't see that as being significant financial investment. But it would be a one-window seamless portal to facilitate business connection with the public service and residents as we try to rejuvenate and rebuild the Collingwood economy. And again, all these recommendations will be subject to perhaps further discussion at the task force if council proceeds with the recommendations. And the last couple of slides, I just thought we should put a flavor of the kind of comments and feedback that we're hearing from residents, and also some of the customer service work that has been done across the organization. So again, I want to thank the mayor and members of council for their leadership and their support. I want to again pay tribute to our staff and to our residents. This is one of those things where we all need to work together, and the staff in Collingwood would tell you that one of the things I always say to them, that none of us is as strong as all of us. And if we can put our shoulders to the wheel, if we can all start rowing in the same direction, with apologies to the mayor, then perhaps we can make a difference. And we are making a difference, and we'll continue to try and do our best to motivate and inspire the people we work with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fareed. I think what I'll do is we're going to break this out because there's a lot packaged into that presentation, and we'd like to unpack and give ample discussion to each of the items. So the first that we're going to do is just receive the report. So it's moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Madigan. Be it resolved that staff report CAO 2020-3 COVID-19 economic and other relief measures economic support and recovery task force be received. So we'll get that on the floor. If there's any discussion about that, let's put that on the floor now. Any questions about receiving the report, council? Councillor Hamlin, I can't see you, and I know Councillor Berman, you are there too, and I can't see you. Do either of you have any questions about receiving the report?
I don't, Mayor Saunders.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Okay, well, seeing no questions, then I will call the vote, and we will start with you, Councillor Comey.
Yes, I agree to receive.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Madigan?
In favor.
Councillor Doherty?
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Berman?
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey?
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin?
In favor.
I am in favor. And Deputy Mayor?
In favor.
Thank you. That is carried unanimously. The second item then is also moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Madigan.
Your worship.
Sorry, yes, go ahead, Councillor.
Deputy Mayor. Was that carried unanimously 8-0 or 9-0?
Oh, did I miss you, Councillor McLeod? My apologies. Councillor McLeod.
In favor.
Was that like the Brady Bunch? Did you just look down and see that, Deputy Mayor? Okay, my apologies. So Councillor McLeod, my check mark migrated into your box. My apologies. All right. So the second part that we're unpacking here is moved again by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Madigan, that the be resolved that the attached economic support and recovery task force items terms of reference, Appendix A of the staff report, be approved. And I'll start with, well, actually discussion. Questions or comments, council, before I get to the vote on this? And I can't see you, Councillor Berman, so you just need to shout out if you have a question, please. Okay, I don't see any question. Oh, sorry.
No.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a couple of questions about the formation of this task force and also about the makeup of it. And in the presentation that the CAO provided to us, it was said that 76% of the businesses in operation in Collingwood are solopreneurs or solo entrepreneurs and so on. And so I wonder then why in the list that was provided to us, there isn't any of those people represented on the task force. There isn't. These are all large companies and that I think are still in operation. And I'm just curious to know how it was that such an omission got made.
Well, I would say that, first of all, they're not all large companies. We have a number of small entrepreneurs, some of whom are not operating at full speed. But if people have suggestions, I'm certainly open to suggestions as well for any individuals they think might be suitable for that role. I am not married, as you know. In the initial staff report, we talked about having 2 council members and 5 representatives from the business community, and we've gone far beyond that. So the goal is to have very much of a cross-section representation from all sectors. I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that. And I will say that throughout the course of the task force's mandate, we will be hearing from various interest groups. So we would like to hear from the BIA. We would like to hear from the Chamber of Commerce. We would like to hear from the Georgian Triangle Development Institute, and potentially a social enterprise group like the Institute of South Georgian Bay. So the purpose of this group is to get a very broad section and to make sure that we cover all the bases we can. And we're trying very hard not to close any doors. So certainly if council has any suggestions, I would invite you to put those forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to reiterate Councillor McLeod's comments relative to the proposed composition of the task force. I do believe, yes, there are some technically small businesses that are represented, but let's be more specific and consider those businesses that are very small, that are 1 or 2 employees, and also those businesses, particularly retail, which are entirely closed, are not operating in any way, and have a set of circumstances that may be even more dire than some of the others that we're hearing about. And I think it is very important that that segment be represented on this committee specifically.
Duly noted. And again, the same comment, if you have suggestions, please send them to us, because we want, again, where the whole thrust of this group is to make sure that we are doing everything we can to assist our local businesses and so that they can stay alive, so that they can be back up and running, that they can employ our people, and that they can get our economy going when we get through this crisis. Any other comments, council? Councillor Comey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to continue on that thread, reading through the staff report, again, it made reference to the public and not-for-profit sector. Is there intent to have representation from some of our not-for-profit and charitable segments of the community join this task force, or do we see them having another role in another spot?
Well, I think social enterprise is a very big part of our economy. As you know, the hospital is our biggest employer. E3 is one of our bigger employers. And there has been a request out to a representative from that sector that I'm waiting to hear back on. But again, if there are suggestions, this is your time to put them in. So if you have some ideas of who might be suitable, please send them in.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor. And I've got you, Councillor Madigan.
Thank you. don't disagree with the comments that have been made by the three prior to me, the sentiment or the flavor in terms of what they've said. I do think it is important that the number of people in terms of who's on the task force, so we've got 8 names at this point, we don't go too far beyond that. Keep it tight, keep it nimble, keep it effective. When I look at this group, I see a group of people who not only have a wealth of business experience, but they have social enterprise or philanthropic tentacles within our community. And I think that if they are allowed to, as was referenced already, for example, engage, say the Chamber, the BIA in particular, for example, the BIA, as an example, they have already, over the last, say, 3 weeks, been highly engaged with all of their membership, so 300 plus people there, and have been gathering data. So whether they had a physical place at the table in terms of the general manager or a business person that's off of the main street, for example, I do know that when they will be asked for data, for information, they will be prepared. And I think that other groups within the community as well. So I don't, as I said, disagree with the sentiment that's been raised by the three prior, but to make this effective, let's keep it tight, nimble, and allow them to be sort of the ones that then structure how they will communicate with the broader masses to gather the information that they need. Thank you.
Well, and I appreciate those comments, and it is going to be a case of striking the right balance. But also, I just want to assure council that whether or not there are all sectors, like individual and size-wise, it's tough to make, to get a person at the table from every grouping. But we will be going out of our way to make sure that we get the input from everybody, so that those viewpoints are very much factored into whatever decisions or measures are proposed by this task force moving forward. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate this. Yeah, I agree with Deputy Mayor Hull. I think this task force can be actually used just as a catalyst to be an info driver for the higher governments. I'm sure that everyone's aware, a lot of the business owners that are entrepreneurs, sole proprietors, they don't have access to government funding. They can't collect it. For instance, even some people that are officers in corporations, we can't access any government funding for us because we can't accept it because we don't pay into it. But that being said, I think the people that are on the task force can be information gatherers, as the Deputy Mayor said, and will help assist in the process of getting to the higher governments, so we don't have to take our money from our taxpayers. We can use it from federal or provincial taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manning. Councillor Jeffrey, you have had your hands involved with the FCM task force that's been speaking with the federal government. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that a lot of the members can cross-reference, and I will bring the information for FCM. I had a 1-hour call again today from 11 till noon, and there's a lot of initiatives and ideas coming from across Canada that I too can bring into the task force. And I'm also a solo entrepreneur. So I do think a lot of these people will have cross sections, and they didn't all start in big business. They all had their starts as entrepreneurs and building their businesses. So I think we'll have a great depth of that opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Any other comments before I call the vote then? Seeing none, I'm going to start with you, Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
Can I just clarify, are we voting to receive this report?
At this point in time, you're voting to receive the terms of reference and that they be approved. So it's not just receiving, you're approving the terms of reference for the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force.
And so I didn't notice that on the slide presentation. Can you just direct me back to that, please?
I think it's schedule or Appendix A to the staff report. It is attached to the staff report.
All right, so, sorry, I thought we were just, on the agenda, we were listening to the report from our CAO, the municipal response update. Is that what that slide presentation was?
Yes.
Okay, and then the next part is to accept the staff report, which deals with the terms of reference for the task force and where the funds are to go and so on. I saw that as a separate activity. So if you could just clarify that with the clerk for me.
Yeah, I'll ask Sarah to clarify. So the motion was in there. First, we received the report, and then we're breaking out the 3 action items, but on there was as well, and part of the staff report was the terms of reference for the task force. So I'll ask Sarah to clarify.
Certainly, for clarification to members, the 7.1 and 8.1 were tied together in the presentation from the CAO. So once Freed had finished his presentation, we moved into the staff report conversation.
Okay, well, that was not made clear to me, and I have definite remarks I want to make about the staff report.
Relative to the terms of reference for the task force?
So I believe what I just heard the clerk say is this, that we're dealing with 7.1 and 8.1.
Yes.
So 8.1 is the staff report, and I do have comments about the staff report. Not specifically, the terms of reference is, what part is that?
So 8.1, it says that staff report CAO 2020-3 COVID-19 economic and other relief measures, economic support and recovery task force be received. And then it says, and that the attached economic support and recovery task force terms of reference appendix A be approved. And then below that, and that further council authorized staff to draw up to 2.5 million from the special fund that was approved at the March 25, 2020 special meeting of the Town of Collingwood Council for the rapid deployment and implementation of a number of projects / programs to be finalized to the satisfaction of the Chief Administration Officer in consultation with the Town Treasurer and the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force. And there's 3 bullets under that. That's where we are. And so the discussion of 7.1, the presentation we just received flowed into 8.1. So we're at 8.1 now, Councillor Hamlin.
So I'm not prepared to vote. I would like to make my remarks about 8.1.
Okay, so we're going to break that out, and we've broken it into the various components. So the first that we had was to receive the receive the staff report, which we voted on. And the second now is to approve the economic support and recovery task force terms of reference, which is appendix A. And then the third bullet contains the 3 action items with the rapid development and implementation of the projects. So at this point in time, we're dealing just with the economic support and recovery task force terms of reference. And then we will be dealing with the 3 action items below that separately.
Well, I have a problem with all of it, so I'm going to vote against the terms of reference, and I'll speak further at the next item.
Okay, so I'll put you down as a nay.
Thank you.
I'm in support. Deputy Mayor?
In favor.
Councillor McLeod?
In favor.
And Councillor Councillor Comey.
I'm in favor, but I've noted that we have said we're open to suggestions for people from other sectors, as were commented by Councillor Doherty and Councillor McLeod at the onset, because the terms of reference clearly state 9 community members. So obviously we're staying open to suggestions of others. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. All right, so that is carried by 8-1. The next item is the further action items. And this is again moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Madigan. If anybody is not comfortable with being named, they can certainly let me know. And it is, be it resolved that council authorized staff to draw up to the 2.5 million special fund that was approved at the March 25, 2020 special meeting of the Town of Collingwood Council for the rapid development and implementation of a number of projects, programs to be finalized to the satisfaction of the CAO in consultation with the town treasurer and the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force. The first bullet is a 6-month no interest loan program to address the urgent financial needs of local businesses. The second item is a matching grant program with a budget of $100,000 to match up to a maximum dollar amount per private contribution of $10,000 toward the COVID-19 relief. And third, the development of an integrated digital business portal targeting Collingwood and the surrounding area to encourage buy local programs to function as a source of information and a community hub for local recovery initiatives and networking, and to strengthen the local economy. And I think for the ease of discussion here, I'm going to separate those into 3 separate baskets. So the first one that we're dealing with right now is the 6-month no interest loan program to address the urgent financial needs of local businesses. So that is on the floor. So questions and comments first. I have Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I have quite a few notes here, and there wasn't the detail in the original agenda that went out in terms of the motion. And I noticed on the slides that it had been further suggested that it would be broken into $10,000 increments up to $1 million. So my notes were all prepared prior to having those further details, but I think they still apply, and I have quite a few comments, so I hope you can bear with me. I think that this has been it's a really good conceptual report on potential programs we need to help our businesses, and by the nature retaining jobs, potentially creating some, and we've already recognized that the potential regional impact that will have, because they're not just necessarily Collingwood jobs. So I was expecting that the recommendations would have been vetted through the task force before coming to council. So I kind of thought we ended up doing things on a parallel as opposed to where I thought they're going to go. So I guess one of my top, I'm going to continue to comment on some of the things, but one of my top questions will be, can we defer this to the task force? Because I believe we saw a proposed meeting for tomorrow, and to come back to council with a more comprehensive, clear program development for it to consider. And then the other question was, can we restrict the vote for available funding to $1 million of the 2.5 to make it incremental, which would give staff the opportunity to come back to council with an interim report on the spending, the uptake, and I just think it would be better to do the programming incrementally. But again, that might be something that the task force would have a comment on or not. So recognizing that other orders of government have the ability, even when they do interest-free loans, when that money gets spent, they have the capacity to earn income from HST, to earn income from corp tax paid, personal income taxes paid. They have another facility to make revenue from those monies spent. As a municipality, we do not. So one of the things we have to keep in mind when we're making this investment in our community is we have
point of order, Your Worship. I'm sorry to interrupt, Councillor Jeffrey, but if she's asking for a motion for deferral, that doesn't require debate. That just requires a vote.
As been pointed out,
clarification from Councillor Jeffrey. You had 2 questions that I was hearing. So are you wanting the answers to those, or are you just putting a motion on the table?
I'm going to have a lot of questions, and I think, as the clerk has pointed out to me many times in other areas, when you make a motion to defer, if there's a seconder, you vote on that. But our procedure bylaw allows us to continue to comment so that everybody gets to comment and then consider the deferral at the end. And that's the premise upon which I'm making these comments.
No, and you're absolutely correct. In the absence of a seconder, there is still time for discussion and answering questions. But just for a clarification, are you asking for a deferral at this point? Or are you asking for clarification of how this would roll out?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions here, and will that deferral to the task force be the best outcome? personally, I think it is, but I'm going to go through all of my questions if that's okay with the mayor.
And, okay, so maybe just for the benefit of the CAO, and I understand these are large items, council, and so I'm going to give some latitude to getting through individual answers, within reason, to allow people to get the questions, because I think this is something we need to flesh out, and the public has to have a good understanding, as do we, of how this would work. So, Councillor Jeffrey, just one point of observation. I think the first meeting of the task force will be next Tuesday. Tomorrow was too aggressive. So there is some time there, but I will look to the CAO just to answer the two questions that I think you've asked so far about looking at rolling this out with the input of the task force. And so I'll get the CAO to answer those questions now, and then I will give you an opportunity to ask some more questions.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll deal with the second questions first. So whether or not we should come back to council to report on an interim basis what the uptake has been, and we can do that within the context of the $1 million threshold. I don't have any concerns with that. I think that would be the reasonable and the right thing to do, and that was always the intention, is for us to do a rolling review with council on an ongoing basis. So similar to the tax deferral and the water and wastewater deferral, I suspect this would be a standing item on council's agenda for the foreseeable future. The first question regarding whether or not we should wait for can we defer is the context of the question. Of course, council can defer. I mean, it is council decision. The issue I would put on the table, though, is that we're providing an initial down payment for the task force to have some real discussion about deployment. That's why we have taken and we have a lot of implementation issues that we can put on the table, but I deliberately did not do that because I wanted to give the task force the flexibility to put their stamp on this. So what we're trying to do here is to accelerate and expedite the program without compromising the task force activities. So in my view, what we're actually doing here is getting the better or optimizing the outcome here by saying you've got $1 million in one case, and you've got 100,000 if council chooses to approve the recommendation. Go away and think through how best we can implement it and how best we can roll this out. What are the rules? What are the criteria? How can people access it? What are the risks involved in all of this? But at least what they will have is something tangible to put their hand on and get involved in. This would not be the only thing, because there are a whole host of non-financial instruments that I suspect this committee would want to come back and provide some recommendations to us. For example, there might be issues around deregulation, expediting municipal approval, doing things of that sort, some of which we may have jurisdiction over, others we may not. But what this does, Councillor Jeffrey, is to put something tangible before the task force without tying their hands. And in my view, it's sort of, it doesn't compromise the work that they're doing. In fact, it expedites and accelerates it without being too prescriptive.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Okay, so I guess, like I said, if the wording that was on the slide was in our motion now, stipulating $10,000 interest-free loans up to $1 million, and we did it based on that platform and restricting the spending to 1 million before someone has to come back to us with respect to that, or we have other $1.5 million worth of funds to roll out into anything else the task force might identify, then I get more comfortable with this, because all of the rest of my questions do apply exactly to the CAO's comments, where our resources to assess applicants, do we have the capability of attaching unpaid debt to the taxes of any business we loan to that owns property? Do we, because I think that Mr. McGarry's questions are good questions, but not to find ways not to do it, but to find ways how to do it best protecting the municipality at the same time, having the impact we want to have on our business community. So if I'm assured that if I can amend that wording of that motion for the 6-month loan to be up to a maximum of $10,000 per business, up to $1 million, and that we're not spending any of the other 1.5 million, and that the program assessment will be done incrementally, then I don't have any other problems, because I know the task force is going to be taking care of all my other questions.
So, Your Worship, sorry, Your Worship.
Go ahead, CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, if I may, Councillor, I wouldn't have any difficulties with doing that. The intention clearly here is to put a fence around this program, and the up to 10,000, up to 1 million in one instance, and up to 10,000 and up to 100,000 in the second instance are both consistent with our thinking. So the motion can be more precise. I would have no difficulties with that proposed amendment.
Okay, so Councillor Jeffrey, I've got your amendment, but I'm going to go around the table first, and then I'll come back and get a seconder on that, okay?
Yep, thank you.
I've got you done, Councillor Roy, but Councillor Hamlin, I have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All of us at this virtual, I'm just going to make remarks. I don't have any questions. So I wanted to say, we at this table, this virtual table, we all want to do what we can to help our businesses and our residents. And we all know how much our residents and businesses need financial help. And I, like all of you, want to make sure they get that help. However, I have to say I'm extremely troubled by the proposal in front of us. We are proposing to create a fund overseen by 4 councillors that circumvents the role of council. In addition, and I'll get into this in a few minutes, it appears to be illegal under the Municipal Act. Municipalities are prohibited from offering loans under Section 17. And of course, that's why Councillor Jeffrey has all the questions she has. No other municipality is considering providing loans to businesses. This town has just gone through a judicial inquiry over the misuse of funds and cronyism. How this council can be considering this proposal in light of that judicial inquiry is beyond me. Offering loans and business support in that fashion is the purview of the federal government. The province is not even doing this. The federal government has created loan guarantees for small and medium-sized enterprises, the Canadian Emergency Business Account offering up to $40,000 in interest-free loans, a 75% wage subsidy for all employers suffering a 30% reduction in revenues. And we heard today from the Prime Minister that additional supports are coming for business. There is no one on this council who does not have a direct pecuniary or private or personal interest in who is going to get these funds. And we all have community connections and up close and personal knowledge of the members of the businesses in our community. This is why councils do not engage in giving money away in this fashion. Even Toronto, the largest and wealthiest city in our country, is not setting up a task force or even a committee of council to decide who in the community who will get loans or cash. No other municipality is, either through a task force or through council. We didn't know who'd be on this task force until about 3 hours ago. Contrary to the staff report, because I just want to correct that, which mentioned that we got the list of candidates and had a chance to comment on them. So who is exactly going to decide where the up to $2.5 million go? We're going to have an unelected CAO, an unelected treasurer, and maybe 2 or 3 others that I can see from looking at the list forwarded us to this morning of who's going to be on the task force, who would not have a pecuniary or personal interest that would require them to withdraw from consideration. Because I did see in the staff report that if people have conflicts of that nature, they will be recusing themselves. So as I say, I can see that the decisions, according to this recommendation, the objectives finalized to the satisfaction of the CAO in consultation with the treasurer, and the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force, of which there may be 2 or 3 without conflicts. This proposal, in my view, is lacking the most basic accountability. In my view, accountability includes 2 things. Firstly, the public knows what the funds are being spent for. For example, at budget time, we have several meetings with the public and several council sessions to argue about sometimes even $5,000. Let me get my video going again. We don't know how the $2.5 million will be spent in any amount of detail. The report says a 6-month no interest loan program for business, the $100,000 for matching grant program, and a software program. That's about the maximum amount of details. More importantly, what will be the full cost of this effort? Some questions I have. 1, what if more businesses apply, then we can make a meaningful loan to? What will we do? 2, what if the businesses can't pay the funds back? What is the exposure to the taxpayers going to be? And who at the town has the expertise to determine if a business loan is worthy? We do not have in-house expertise for this. And I looked through all of the wonderful things the task force and the town wants to do in support of this. And I can see that we are going to need to hire more consultants than we probably have now and more employees. How much is it really, are we really contemplating we're going to spend here? And how do we cap it? We all know we started with the $1 million estimate for the judicial inquiry. These things grow like, what they say, Topsy. When will we know we're hitting a ceiling here? And I do not believe with 1,700 employees that I heard our CAO indicate we have, that we're going to stop at 200 and say, sorry, we've reached $1 million. So, and also I wanted to remind you that municipalities are prohibited from running a deficit, unlike our provincial and federal governments. I mentioned there were 2 parts to accountability. The first was the public knowing how its funds are being spent. The second one is if the public doesn't like how the funds are being spent or managed, then it can vote those out of office who are doing that managing. Well, what do we have proposed here? The resolution is, and I just have another look at this, that we allow staff to draw up to $2.5 million in a special fund for the implementation of a number of programs to be finalized to the satisfaction of the CAO, consultation of the treasurer, and this task force. Who is accountable to our residents from that group? I can say that we all know that we suspended regular council meetings for the time being, and I can see from the staff report that this task force will be meeting every 2 weeks. And that the role of the task force, other than deciding where the funds will go, and there's a large examination in the staff report of what the task force is going to do. It's doing in large measure what council has been elected to do. Even one of the things I couldn't help, I just had to read it like 10 times, is going to be the eyes and ears of the community for how the business community is doing. More importantly, this is not our jurisdiction. It is the responsibility of the federal government, not the provinces, not the municipalities. It's a coordinated effort through the federal government only. The brightest minds among our top bankers at our main banks, the best legal brains on Bay Street, and the top civil servants in Ottawa have been hammering out the details of what the federal loan business program will look like. We know the government's offering loans, interest-free loan guarantees, interest-free loans up to $40,000 with up to $10,000 of that amount forgivable through the Canada Emergency Business Account, wage subsidies up to 75%, additional credit programs through the Business Development Bank, deferral of GST, and more. And since this meeting started, our finance minister has announced that the $40,000 loans will be available starting tomorrow. I have before me, I printed it off the internet this morning from a top law firm in Toronto, not the one I was at. It's 15 pages. And the 15 pages, this is just the programs that have been announced by the federal government and the province of Ontario. There are so many things in here that, you know, from $1 billion that the province is going to put into the relief fund, to 200 million they're going to give to social services, to relief for food banks. It took me half an hour to read this alone. So I'm almost at the end, you'll be happy to know. Collingwood does not have the resources or expertise to wade into this jurisdiction of responsibility. In my view, this is a national crisis and we need a national response. Most critically, and as I mentioned earlier, Collingwood does not have the power under the Municipal Act to provide loans. We only have the powers granted to us in the Municipal Act by the province of Ontario. I have spent some time this morning reading the Municipal Act, and as we know, there is a section there that says a number of things municipalities cannot do. They cannot borrow money. They cannot levy income tax. They cannot levy gas tax, and they cannot make a loan. And even that's section 17, and section 107 emphasizes this again in the specific context of economic development. I am shocked that we are considering this proposal today. Businesses across the province and across Canada are in the same situation. Our entire economy is in jeopardy. This is not a municipal crisis, it is a national and global one. The answer to this problem will not be local. We do not have enough funds to bail out every business in Collingwood as much as we may want to. It is time for political leadership, and I am of the view it would be irresponsible of council today to vote in favor of this staff report. Those are my remarks.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. And just to address a few of those, council is not delegating the responsibility for these decisions to the task force. The task force is going to be advising council about how these programs would be implemented and what they might look like. And I think Councillor Jeffrey alluded to that in terms of when would we look at these programs. I will leave the legality of the loans. It's my understanding it can be done. It's actually my understanding that there are municipalities in Simcoe County that have done that. Bradford, West Gwillimbury, I think, has enacted a similar program. So I would lead that, and if we need legal advice on that, we will seek it. But I do not believe that there's any unlawful delegation going on here, and we're not bonusing. And I would say that while the federal government for the last 3 weeks has been announcing significant plans, they change daily, and the times at which these are going to be implemented are critical. It's been 3 weeks since our businesses have been closed down, and what is it looking like on the ground? And we've heard from some of our local businesses how impactful that has been. So I do believe that municipalities, I believe all levels of government are involved in this. And what the loan program is designed to do is to backfill these businesses while the federal and provincial programs get unpacked and made available to our residents. So I do not believe this is an improper exercise. And I believe that we're doing everything in our power to try and act responsibly to help our residents. We know how reliant our economy is on these small employers. And if these small employers don't survive the crisis, then we're going to have a very different economy. And I think it's very clear we are going to have a very different economy when we get through this first surge of the virus. So I believe everyone around the table is doing what they can in good faith to help our residents. And while this is a good, healthy discussion, I think we tread a little close there to the point of personal privilege by asserting that this council would be acting in any way other than in good faith in pursuing this. And with that, I will pass it to the CAO.
I'd just like to respond briefly to those.
I'm going to, Councillor Hamlin, I'm going to ask the CAO to respond to your questions. If you have further comments, I will allow you an opportunity.
Thank you.
Councillor CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks to Councillor Hamlin for raising some of the issues that she raised. In terms of the delegation of authority, I don't think the intention here, if it wasn't clear in the staff report, certainly there was no intent here to delegate any of this authority to the the task force. I mean, that's why we are bringing this to council. And that's why I am in agreement with Councillor Jeffrey's proposal that on an incremental basis, this issue be brought before council to inform members how this money is being spent, and the criteria and all those considerations, if that's council's intention, can be brought forward for approval by the task force. The task force will not have any delegated authority. In fact, the last time we spoke, it was made clear that this task force would report either to SIC or to council, and I think that is still the intention. In terms of how this money is transferred, we will obviously seek a legal advice to ensure that nothing that we're doing is contravention of the Municipal Act. I don't think it was any of our intention to do that, and I'm glad that this issue has come out, and I think it would have been helpful to be given a heads up on some of these considerations. My understanding is not dissimilar to what the mayor said, is that many municipalities are doing this through their economic development entity. In some of those instances, they have the Economic Development Corporation, and the municipalities are providing the support through that corporation. And the intention, again, from our perspective, was to do something similar. We are not experts in administering a loan program, and we don't intend to take that responsibility on. We are seeking individuals in the community who already have that mandate as part of what they do, and the intention was to use them to facilitate this. So it wasn't going to be something that we clearly don't have the expertise in to administer. And on the issue of the federal and provincial programs, absolutely, I agree. This is a national crisis. The intention of staff in bringing forward this recommendation was to respond to what we are being asked for by the business community, and secondly, to try and provide them with an interim support mechanism while they're awaiting federal and provincial funding. So, you know, there's nothing in here that we are attempting to take away from council's authority. If there's anything in the recommendation that speaks to that, I want to apologize, because that was never the intent. And secondly, the only rationale for providing this support is to try and do something for our business community, was not to circumvent any statutory provisions.
Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that the staff report recommendation is such that it says council authorizes staff to draw on the 2.5 million. And I think that is where I'm getting my understanding that we are giving these funds over without much oversight. But nevertheless, I do, and so I have a question though, if I may, of our CAO and then. So as I said, I understand since our meeting began here at 1:30 that the finance minister has indicated that they are intent on getting these funds out to our businesses like within the next day or so, and that the banks have been told that they have 2 days to process applications. And of course, banks, as we know, are totally set up. That's what they've been doing for a century, is giving out loans to businesses. And so the federal program is going to be run through the banks, this $40,000 interest-free loan. So if this program is, as I am thinking, what, you know, because I've been participating in the meeting, I don't have 100% knowledge of what I think I know. What if these funds are being made available in the next couple of days? How does that work with what you would like to have happen here?
I think the answer to that is if that money is hitting the streets, then we would re-examine this whole program. The reason for the program was to try and backfill and cover this delay, because it's been 3 weeks and they've still been talking about the types of programs, and they've been changing them today. As you've indicated, you just read through 15 pages and read something on your screen now. But if the landscape changes, then we would certainly re-examine what it is we're proposing. And I'll pass it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Hamlin. I have no desire to use public resources. I mean, I believe strongly that we are a guardian of the public purse, and we've got to try and be very judicious in how we dispense and make recommendations on spending public money. So I have no desire. If the federal program is going to hit the business community tomorrow, I would say, yeah, I mean, I would defer to the feds. I would defer to the banks willingly, because you quite rightfully, Councillor Hamlin, pointed out through your worship that this is not the area that we need to play in. All I was trying to do as someone who, bring forth recommendations to elected officials and knowing what the business community is, to reflect a gap that I find was happening is sorely missing in the business community, and trying to see whatever I can do to bring forward to council to say, if the money isn't forthcoming and it's not being redeployed with the rapidity that we think it should, is there an opportunity for us to provide some interim support to our business community to let them stay alive and help them to pay the bills and keep some of their employees on? There's all kinds of programs. There's a wage subsidy. There is a 6-month, there is the $40,000 loan program. There's the Canada Emergency Relief Benefit. There is the EI program. There's now student assistance. There's a plethora of programs out there that we can access. The only motivation to bring this forward, council, is to say, can we do something in the interim, because the business community out there is crying out for help. And is there a legal, accountable, transparent, and I think I use these words in my presentation, way of dispensing a small amount of public resources to shore up the community? And all of the concerns that you mentioned, Councillor Hamlin, are concerns that we sort of thought about. But we think, we say, and I've been getting a lot of comments from council, members of council, as well as the public, to say, when you guys going to put something in here? When are you going to do something to help our community? So this is our attempt to put something before council that was well-intentioned, done with the public policy motivation and public finance attribute that you see reflected in there. Nothing in this report was meant to denigrate from council's authority or to move council in a direction that would bring up some of the past challenges that we face as a community.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, may I just offer 2 quick comments? I just wanted.
Quickly. Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say I do appreciate the CAO's good intentions in this staff report. And I know he hears from the business community and our residents, as much or perhaps more than even individual councillors do. So I'm certainly not imputing any, bad intentions on his part. I know it's coming from a good place. And I do also appreciate his comments that he wished he could have had a heads up on my concerns about the legality of this. But quite frankly, if I can just comment on that, I was watching the online portal to see when the agenda would come up for today and what exactly the staff report would have. And I guess I was emailed it, but it went into my junk mail because I usually get my agenda, I pick it up paper-wise. So I didn't even see the agenda till last night. So this morning I started looking at this, and it took me several hours. It took me several hours to read through the Municipal Act and John Mascaron on municipal law and really put this together. So, and I think our public, if I can just also say, who would have maybe still not have realized the staff report was online, if they have my problems, might have appreciated some time to consider this. And I know we are all moving at such a rapid speed, and it's so hard for all this to happen at once, but that's my frustration with this. I share CAO Min's frustration. Thank you for letting me have those remarks.
Well, I think council is working very hard as our staff in very challenging circumstances, and we're all trying to push forward, as the CAO said, in the same direction to provide relief to our community and our residents and our businesses. We're all very much involved in this, so I think our residents are looking towards us for that kind of leadership and not just passing the buck to the federal and provincial governments, because we don't control them. What we do control is our community, and so we're all here to push forward as best we can for our community and to safeguard their interests in this very, very difficult time. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship. I also have some concerns about this particular part of the Economic Recovery Task Force implementation. And my concerns would be somewhere between the severity of Councillor Jeffries and Councillor Hamlin's. But generally, we, the town, are not in the position of making loans. We are not a bank. And although it has been stated that there would be a formula put forward whereby some third-party body who has the expertise to evaluate loan applications would be put in place to administer these loans. We are being asked to vote on this without knowing exactly what that mechanism or what that body would be. And further to that, it seems to me that it is not necessary for us today to approve a loan package of up to $1 million in order to enable this task force. We are giving the task force a mandate and a number of tools to start its work in a very robust manner. And should that task force come back to us and say, we recommend that a loan package be put in place and executed through one of the banks or BDC or the Economic Development Corporation or some such, we can then proceed and implement at that time. But I'm not comfortable at this moment in time in approving this particular aspect of the recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll pass it to the CAO. Fareed.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Doherty. Again, these are all legitimate questions, and if it is Council's intent to, as Councillor Jeffrey is suggesting, to go to the task force and seek their approval and come back to Council with the recommendations and some of the details, that is certainly an option available to Council. I just want to say that the intention was, again, not for us to administer this. It was going to be administered through a third party, and that has all the attributes that Councillor Hamlin spoke about. And the reason why I'm being a bit circumspect is because I haven't had the discussions with detailed discussions with the third party, but those discussions, will happen. But again, if Council decides that they want to defer the consideration, and give the task force an opportunity to come back through staff, that's clearly an option as well. I just want to reiterate that the intention in this was to move this along, to get some amount of cash in the system, and to try and recognize the challenges faced by our business community. But certainly the deferral consideration is an issue that, at staff level, we'd be happy to return with those recommendations.
I'm not going to look for a seconder yet, so I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to comment on the staff report and what's on the floor. Councillor McLeod, I had you next, and Deputy Mayor, I've got you down too.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I would like to reiterate, as Councillor Hamlin did, that no one is trying to impugn anybody's intentions in this discussion. That being said, however, in our meeting on March the 25th, our CAO said, and I quote, "I do not see this as a money spending task force." And also he said, "This is not a committee that will have a budget." And he also said, "This is not a decision-making body. The ultimate action will come from council." And he also said it was not a committee that is going to spend money. These questions were asked repeatedly and answered repeatedly. And yet the recommendation before us in this motion is that council authorize staff to draw up the $2.5 million finalized to the satisfaction of the chief administrative officer in consultation with the treasurer and the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force. And very silent is this motion on any action of the council. So I'm quite confused about that. I am not, again, trying to impugn anyone's reputation or intentions. However, there is a disconnect between the wording of this motion and the recommendation that was passed by this council on March the 25th. I voted for the $2.5 million, not because I was going to be loaning it to businesses. I thought it was going to be going into the pockets of lifties who'd lost their jobs and are servers in the summer and can't pay their rent. That's where my heart was. And I understand the importance of our business community, but I think we may need to feed people first and keep roofs over their heads. So I would like to move an amendment to the first part of this severed motion. And that amendment is that further that staff be directed to provide to the Strategic Initiatives Committee of Council recommendations on expenditures from the special fund for approval, and that all expenditures, drawdowns, and other provision of funds for programming receive approval in a vote of council at the Strategic Initiatives Committee. And further, that the emphasis be placed on relief for individuals and families in the community. And the reason that I say that is because, again, 76% of Collingwood's businesses are one-person shops. So those are people those are individuals who are going to need to keep the roof over their head. Those are individuals who are going to need to keep food in the fridge. And I think that we ought to be supporting them if we're going to be supporting anyone. Furthermore, I would like to say that $10,000 a head adds up to $1 million after 100 applications. We're going to pick 100 winners in our community. I don't like the idea of that very much either. So that is my proposal as an amendment to this first section, having to do with anything to do with this $2.5 million fund.
Okay, I will let the CEO respond, but I'm not going to look for a seconder for that amendment yet because we have the potential of a deferral and we may be able to wrap this all up together as a more instructive package for staff to look at. I'll pass it to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you to Councillor MacLeod, this is not a decision-making task force. This is not a money spending task force. All of the decision-making authority and the financing of this task force reside with council. That's why we're bringing forward these recommendations to council now. There's nothing in this report that denigrates from council's authority. This task force will take its instructions from SIC or from council with staff recommendation. This task force has no authority to spend any money unless that money has been approved by council. And this support that we're proposing as well could mean that employers can use that money to subsidize the wages of their employees who cannot afford food. The $10,000 in matching grant can also support all those vulnerable people in the community who have difficulties maintaining their current way of life. So nothing in this report denigrates from any authority that council currently has. This is a task force that will take its instructions from council. The consideration that Councillor Jeffrey made, which is very constructive, is to include a provision in the resolution to make that absolutely clear. And I did indicate as well, I have no issues with that. So any concerns that this council might have regarding the ability to take away from its authority, I can say with absolute certainty that was never the intention. And if the language needs to be cleaned up, we'll clean the language up to make sure that it's absolutely clear. But this task force has no spending authority. They have no decision-making authority. All of that will be derived from SIC and council.
Does that make it clear?
It does. We will clearly have to change the wording of the motion.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, and through you to my colleagues around the table and to our staff. It's interesting, I think, in a microcosm to see how difficult it is for all levels of government to make decisions in such a short period of time to an issue that is continually moving. I have chatted with a number of people in our community, for example, who were originally relieved when Prime Minister Trudeau announced that he would be offering $2,000 or $500 a week to members who had lost their employment, only to find out that they didn't qualify for one reason or another. And the Prime Minister and his cabinet and the government in a period of time have now had to amend the original program to include people who have maybe lost a part of their income so that they somehow still qualify for some type of assistance. And we're hearing about this all over the place, whether it be here in Collingwood, the province, or the country. I'm really thrilled, and I don't mean to pontificate, and I don't mean to sound like a bit of an ass when I say this, but when I compare past councils, I'm really pleased by the conversation that is taking place today. I believe that we are a council that for the better half of a year and a half have been fully transparent. And in fact, we are having very healthy, open discussions about what is the best for our community. We may not agree how we are going to execute what we think is best, but the fact is that we're having a very robust, transparent, open conversation so that those around the table and those that are watching from home, wherever, can hear what it is we have to say. I think that's a real compliment to all of us, whether we agree or disagree on the final outcome. I am very supportive of this because I think although some very valid concerns have been raised as it relates to the funds, the allocation of the funds, the limits, etc., and I do feel that there have been some excellent suggestions, and I'm hoping that either an amendment or a deferral does come forward. But the reality is that putting this task force in place to begin with is just step one. And if I may just give an anecdote or an assumption, and that is that this is an issue that is going to be well beyond us from an economic standpoint. And I'm going to focus purely on the hospitality or the tourism industry. I have spoken with a couple, and I clearly state just a couple of people who have already indicated to me that they anticipate that some of the people that they did employ and that they hope to re-employ when they open their doors will in fact have moved on, because they've made the decision that, for example, because they can't afford the rent of the place that they had or have, they are maybe returning to the community in which they came from to live with another sibling, mom and dad, etc. And it is quite possible, as has been the case in the past when we've had economic downturns, that when things start to go back to normal, they may choose not to come back to Collingwood. They may not come back to our region. They may find economic employment in their area, and they may choose to stay there because staying with mom and dad helps to put their economic foundation back in place. And so some of the conversations I've had with a couple of people, and again, I stress that, they're concerned that, for a region that is already grappling with underemployment in terms of the hospitality, the food industry, et cetera, that in fact, 6 months from now, we may not have enough people in our area to come back to work when things return to normal. I'm speculating. I don't have any hard facts. But that's something we have to consider. And I think it's something that as part of this task force, these are the type of micro and macro conversations that they will have, that they will then draw upon from the other organizations within our community, whether it be BIA, the Chamber, maybe the faith-based community, our social network, et cetera, and get a real sense of what the true needs are today, in the weeks to come, but potentially what our community is also going to be facing, 6 months, even a year or beyond, as we try and return to normal. And I know that we've already approved the task force, so I don't mean to go on about that, but I want to be very clear that I think that we've got a good group of people that have broad representation. Take away their employment and who their employer are. I look at the list and I can pick out a few people in there that have very strong connections to the faith-based community, very strong connections to our social services community, whether they be Rotarians, whatever the case may be. They are going to bring a lot to the table. And I think in the couple of meetings that they will have, it'll be very clear in some of the things that they may bring back to our staff and some of the recommendations that we will have a better opportunity down the road to understand how this is moving and how we as a community can truly best support not only our businesses and the owners of those businesses, but our residents as a whole. Because none of us signed up for this. And, Councillor Hamlin, I agree with you. There's nobody in this community that wouldn't have some type of direct, indirect, potential conflict of interest. That's a reality. It's a reality in a small community. It's a reality in a community where people are integrated because they're involved in more than just one thing outside of their employment. But that also is a good thing. And I hope that when all of these things sort of come together, they will be done in the best interest of the community, and that they will give us the best information so that we can make further decisions. So what am I trying to say? I think to Councillor McLeod's point, Councillor Jeffrey's point, some of the points that were made by Councillor Hamlin, we've had a report that's been given to us in terms of what we could look at next steps, but it does appear that maybe the prudent step would be to allow the task force to initially meet, to start to put together a framework of things that may or may not be advisable for council to further approve. Because to Councillor Hamlin's point, I mean, just in the couple of hours that we've been talking, and in the days since we've last met, announcement after announcement has come out from whether it be the federal, the provincial, other sectors, and what we're talking about today, although well-intended, may be irrelevant tomorrow, based on what other bodies of government do. So my final comment, just in closing, would be just to say that I think that we as a council, as 9 members, and our staff are doing the best that we can. I am thrilled with the discussion that we are having, the open and transparency that we are demonstrating. I truly believe that we all have the best intentions of our community at our heart. And I think that if we allow this task force to meet and start the process and then come back, we will be in a much better place as a council to make a decisive decision as to how do we best assist our business community and in turn our residents as a whole. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other council members who have not yet had an opportunity? Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson, and everyone else for the comments. I like it when I can speak after Keith and agree with him wholeheartedly. It makes it a lot nicer to segue into my comments. The task force, as I stated earlier, they can be our information highway. They can help us write our recipe for success. And but with all the things that the government have promised over the last 3 weeks, my son was laid off 21 days ago, he applied for unemployment, which was guaranteed to him in 5 days, and he received it today. That's 21 days later. So I believe charity does begin at home, but at the same time, this is like putting a Band-Aid on throwing pennies at $1 million. We just don't have it. And we did vote that all 5 hands would have to go up to us to give money. And I think the CAO has made it quite clear that that's how it will continue to be. So I enjoy the passion. It's well known that I own many businesses in Collingwood, and I've been affected by this tremendously, and there's no help for a guy like me. We've been paying our staff out of our own pockets. So just imagine 29 years in business can go away in 3 months. It's kind of scary. And I share that fear with the rest of the community. And I make this decision wholeheartedly that I don't want to give money from our taxpayers to businesses. And I'm one of those businesses. But let's hope that the feds in the province step up, as they have promised many times, and have come through. A lot of these loans, just to make everybody understand, the $40,000 loan with a 25% only is for people that have $50,000 or more in wages. So a lot of these small businesses don't even they just don't cut the mustard to get that money. So it's easy to sit back and say that everybody's going to get money from every other form of government, but it's not there. And if we don't think that small businesses run our country, then we have to really try to figure out what does then, because I'm a firm believer that it does, and it will continue to. And we won't rebound from this. This is not like a recession. There will be no new norm. So I'm hoping and praying that the conversation today, that made with passion and conviction, won't matter tomorrow, because the federal government will come in and finally do what they promised to do 3 weeks ago. That being said, thank you very much for your time and letting me comment.
Thank you, Councillor Manning. Councillor Comey.
Thank you. I always laugh because by the time it's time for me to speak, I can hear the household noise just coming up. So I will always apologize in advance for any kid noise. I want to thank all the councillors for their comment. I agree with Councillor McLeod and Councillor Hamlin, and I thank them both for all the time they put into their comments when it comes to the loan program. I'd like to offer some comments, if I could, with respect to the lens I saw the fund through, the community fund, which was helping some of our charities and not-for-profit. So in terms of the 2.5 million, I mean, if we're looking at 100,000, what is that, about 4% of the total fund available? And again, under the lens and purview of this being in response to the virus and the passionate comments about stay at home and we're trying to limit the spread, this is what I'm seeing in our community. I'm seeing those offering, let's say, food services to those in need, coming out into the community and saying, can you help us out? Can you get us some grocery store cards? Can you make a food donation? And then those groups are having to go around town and expose themselves by picking up these various grocery cards or food. And what I had hoped that the fund could do was be like, let's not do that. Let's limit the spread. And let's cut you a check so you can go one time to the grocery store and get what you need. And we don't have to have people running from one end of town to the other to support needs at this time, because this is the whole point. We're trying to be limiting people's exposure and the spread. So I have a concern about the limited amount available to our not-for-profits and charities. I think it should be greater. And I'm not necessarily in favor of them needing to match, because it's the same problem. They're continuing trying to find a way to reach people to get the donations. And we want everybody sitting tight and allow the fund, that's how I interpreted it, to respond to this need as quickly as possible, if not as of yesterday. So perhaps CAO and Min could speak to a little bit of this. I know Director Culver and of course Jennifer Parker and 211, all these groups are coming together. I would like to hear sooner than later that we are able to cut some checks to these, to these groups in need.
I think that's part of the matching fund, but CAO, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Comey, and thanks to Councillor Comey for her particular interest, ongoing interest in some of these considerations. Of course, I mean, I think the intention for the matching, and I know that Councillor may have some concerns or issues with the matching, was to try and get to the vulnerable in the community, but certainly the there is a lower threshold that we could put in place and look at, for example, not requiring a matching fund. But Your Worship, I just want to put something on the table based on the discussions and considerations I'm hearing from members of council, and I'm sensing some concerns and some hesitation regarding the recommendations from a couple of perspectives. One is what seemed to be the feeling that the task force is going to have some decision and finance fiscal authority, and secondly, the mechanics of the two programs haven't been finalized. So I'm going to make a recommendation if council is inclined to perhaps refer the staff recommendations contained in this report to the advisory task force, and that will come back with the council with the advice of the task force, and perhaps come back with some more detail to deal with it. So if council is so inclined, the staff report can be referred to the task force, and this is consistent with, I think, Councillor Jeffrey's earlier comment, and then we will return back with the recommendation based on the task force deliberation. Again, no decisions will be made, no spending, no allocation without return back to council and without getting council's deliberation. If council is so inclined, you can approve the terms of reference as you have. You may wish, again, if it is your desire, to even refer the integrated business portal recommendation to the task force. So all of the recommendations that council have before it today could be referred to the task force without any commitment from council, and then staff would have to return back with this task force recommendation to council at the next meeting.
Thank you for that. And I guess I was thinking along the same lines. Just before I make any comments, I'm going to give Councillor Berman an opportunity. If you have any comments, Councillor Berman.
Microphone. No, I don't. I'm good with all of this so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what the CAO has suggested, a referral is different than a deferral. It's sending it back to staff. And as I understand the recommendation from the CAO, he's recommending that it be referred and it go back through staff to the task force. The task force give their input. It would then come back through staff, and a more detailed proposal would be put forward with recommendations based on input from the task force going through the staff and then coming back to council for decisions, individual decisions on each of these items. And as has been made abundantly clear, it was never the intention that the task force would have any decision-making process or ability other than making recommendations back to council that would then be adopted. So I think this is respecting that process and those delineations. And so I'm going to look first to Councillor Jeffrey, because she had the motion to deferral and I didn't put a seconder to that. And Councillor Jeffrey, are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm great with that.
Okay, and I think somebody had an amendment. I think it was Councillor McLeod. Councillor McLeod, I didn't get a seconder for your amendment. Are you good with this referral idea, or would you like your amendment to move forward?
Can I take a minute? Yes, it has been made clear to me that the wording of the motion which we are considering could use some work. But if we're referring it back to staff, then I think that an amendment is not required. Thank you.
And I think your comments were duly noted, so I would imagine that's going to find its way into the staff report one way or other. So then I'm going to ask Councillor Comey and Councillor Madigan, you were the movers of this motion. I'm wondering if you would be prepared to move the referral back to staff and the task force for a staff report to come back with recommendations from the task force about the items that we have been discussing, namely the business loan and the loan concept. And so if you are good with that, Councillor Comey, are you prepared to move the referral?
Mr. Mayor, I am. Just a quick note, I don't want the emphasis simply to be on the business loan scenario. The comments I made at the end with regard to the not-for-profit and removal of the matching are ways to ways to facilitate that. I'm sure CAO made note of that go back as well. But other than that, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we covered that with Councillor McLeod's comments, but I guess to look to the CAO, are we proposing then to push all of the 3 bullets under this item? Because I had severed them. So do you want to just throw all 3 back include them in the referral? Is that the recommendation?
That was going to be my recommendation, Your Honor, that sorry, Your Worship. I've raised you a few notches. It's been a long day.
Yes.
Yeah, so the three recommendations would be all be referred back to the task force.
Good. Okay. So with that clarification, then, Councillor Comey, you prepared to move the referral?
Yes.
Just
And
Mayor
clerk-
Saunderson?
the clerk
before we get a
has some-
seconder.
Yeah, just 1 second before you vote. The clerk has some words of
Okay.
wisdom.
Okay, clerk. Sarah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
This is back on Councillor Jeffrey's request for it, the referral, being a referral, normally would come from the individual that made the recommendation.
Okay, I understood Councillor Jeffrey to ask for a deferral, not a referral, but I'm not. Did you ask for a referral, Councillor?
Yeah, I asked for it to be referred to the task force so that it could
Oh,
be worked
referred.
on and come back.
Okay, my apologies. I misunderstood. I thought it was a request for a deferral. So that being said, then I've got Councillor Jeffrey moving the referral, and I need a seconder. Councillor Madigan. All right, so we've got the referrals on the table for all 3 bullet items in the action plan, and it's seconded by Councillor Madigan. So I will start with Councillor Jeffrey. Yep, Councillor McLeod.
Just a point of clarification. These 3 points that we are referring back to staff, through staff to the task force are not the only 3 things that are going to be contemplated by the task force. The staff is going to take what was said today and put that in a new report. Yes, just to be very, very clear.
Well, absolutely. I mean, let's be very clear. When we had the meeting on March 25, that was the first trench of relief. Today, we're looking at another trench of relief. And by passing 3 items or 4 items or 2 items, that doesn't close the door on any future items. These are ongoing discussions. And as we've noted many times during the meeting, everything is evolving even as we speak. So this is not limiting any options moving forward. This is simply putting it back to council or to staff through the task force with all of the discussions we've had today. And if anything should get missed out, it's certainly open to council to raise that and push a motion forward in the future. So we're not tying anybody's hands here. We're trying and as best we can to move forward in a strategic way to grant relief and put measures in place to help our residents and our businesses. And if people feel we've missed something, you are absolutely welcome to raise them by email, by our conference, video conferences that we held last Friday. Council is absolutely at the table all the time, and we need to hear from you whenever you have a suggestion. So it's not just limited to meetings.
Sorry, just to continue my clarification there. So there was the 3 items that were contained in this motion. Will those 3 plus others be included? I don't feel as though I really understood the answer to that question.
Well, I'll look to the CAO. I think the CAO understands what we've discussed today. And what I'm saying is, I don't think any doors are being closed, but CAO, on this specific referral, are you dealing only with the 3 items on the table, or will you consider other aspects, given we do have to appreciate that the task force is an economic support and recovery task force. If there are other programs, we're not closing the door on those. And they may come back in another form, but they may not come back through the task force to the committee or to council because they might not fall within the mandate of the task force. And any item that doesn't come within the mandate of the task force, CAO, will there be a possibility to pursue those moving forward?
Thank you, Your Worship. So council can decide to give us the flexibility to be able to use our discretion to bring items before the task force, or council can be more prescriptive and list all the items that they want us to address with the task force.
I would suggest we try to keep it as broad as possible. And then when the reports come back, if it's an area that's been missed, then certainly we're open to suggestions.
So just final clarification, then we can take these 3 items off the table if we, in the referral, yes? Is that what I understood the CIO just to
No.
say? I'm sorry if I'm being obtuse.
I think we're being a little overly formalistic here.
Okay.
Okay. So we're referring these specific items through staff back to the task force to get input from the task force. And the mandate of the task force is economic support and recovery. But if there are areas that council is very concerned about, they can certainly email staff and the mayor and say that we think this is something that needs to be pursued. Staff has very loudly heard, I think, the comments today. And so those are issues that they will look at moving forward. Whether it goes through the task force or not, kind of depends on the mandate of the task force, but it's certainly on the table, and staff, I think, are aware of it. And if council feels they would like to follow up to make sure that staff are looking at options, then they are, you are absolutely entitled to do that.
Thank you.
Does that help to clarify?
I think it does.
Okay. Councillor Doherty, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And it occurred to me when Councillor McLeod was asking her questions that there could be an opportunity for us to just slightly amend this referral to indicate that the activities may include these 3 items and any others as may be recommended by the task force, based on their meetings or discussions or some such. So it certainly acknowledges that there were some specific ideas that were pitched to them, but it also gives them full mandate to come back with anything else that they consider to be relevant.
I'll look to the CAO. CAO, do you feel would you like that included in the recommendation, or are you comfortable with what you've heard today?
Thank you again, Your Worship. I'd be happy with the direction of council. If council, like I said, wants to be more prescriptive in terms of providing an inventory of the issues that the task force should consider, I'm sure staff will take that to the task force. If council wants to give us the flexibility to discuss, among other things, the 3 or 4 items that we discussed today, we'll do that as well.
Councillor Jeffrey, it's your referral. Are you comfortable with the referral being for the 3 items and any other items that staff and the task force may deem appropriate?
If the CAO is comfortable, I am comfortable.
Okay, good. Deputy Mayor, you had your hand up quickly there.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment. I think the less prescriptive we could be, the better. I have served on a couple of task forces in the past, and those task forces have been given sort of a very broad macro mandate. And I, quite frankly, wouldn't want to participate on a task force if it was prescriptive, or if I was simply just being asked to give comment and approve on something that was already arranged. So, and I'm not choosing my words very well, but these 3 items, for example, I would want to be a part of a task force that would give me the opportunity to review, reflect, and come back with recommendations on a whole host of issues. That's the very nature of a task force, and quite frankly, the whole purpose of having one. We are looking to, again, a list of people who, when I look at the list, have a broad range of experiences, range of expertise, and I think that they will come to the table with some very creative solutions, not only to comment on what we as a council have discussed, but on things, hopefully, quite frankly, hopefully, that we have not discussed. Because the items that we haven't discussed is really probably the value that they will bring back to us for consideration.
Yeah.
Good. All right, then I think I'm going to suggest we move forward with the referral on a non-prescriptive basis, allowing maximum flexibility for staff and the task force to come up with alternative or other ideas. It's moved by Councillor Jeffrey and seconded by Councillor Madigan. So I will start with Councillor Jeffrey. How do you vote?
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin?
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor,
In favor?
Councillor McLeod,
In favor.
Councillor Comey,
In favor.
Councillor Madigan,
In favor.
Councillor Doherty,
In favor?
and Councillor Berman.
In favor.
That is carried unanimously. So that is referred back to staff and the task force. So the next item is number 9.1. It's a notice of motion. And Councillor Hamlin, would you like to read your notice of motion in for us, please?
Sorry, yes, I just have to pull up the agenda here again. My iPad closed. Right. I am not muted. Okay. Whereas the town of Collingwood and community are conducting a number of tributes for all our frontline and essential service workers during the COVID-19 crisis, be it resolved that council hear and endorse the national tribute to frontline workers on May 24, 2020 at 7 p.m. by lighting a candle or turning on a flashlight in thanks and appreciation during the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you. So that will come up for vote at the next council meeting. County report, item 10, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I just quickly wanted to mention three things. One is that at our last meeting, I had mentioned that the county landfill sites across the county have been closed, and then made reference to the fact that we may say changes to that. And in fact, since our last meeting, it's been well publicized through the county and through the media and through the town and other sources that 4 sites have been opened. I have been questioned by one resident as to why the landfill in the 10th concession, the town of Collingwood, was not open when the other 4 were. And 2 considerations. One is that the 4 that were selected were based on geography and centralized locations. So the fact that the 10th line is the western, or almost the most western part of the county, from a logistical standpoint, even though it serves a large population in Collingwood, the one in Clearview was more central to a broader population, including Clearview, Springwater, Wasaga Beach, and Collingwood. The other part, and it's important to know, and this is ongoing regardless of COVID-19 or not, is that the county landfill over in Clearview off of 26, they take hazardous materials that the site here on the 10th concession in Collingwood does not at any time. So if you do have things like paint cans, for example, that you're cleaning out of your garage, that wouldn't be permitted to take to our landfill at any time, but it is at the one in Clearview. So that was another reason for why that particular site was kept open, was reopened versus the one here in Collingwood. The second is that I think it's been publicized again through various social media channels in the press, et cetera, and of course in your updates, Mayor Saunderson, but the bus that links Collingwood to Wasaga Beach, that's route number 4. There is no change to the scheduling. There were some modifications made to the other 3, but not to number 4, with one minor exception, and that is there is no service this Friday, Good Friday. So in observance of Good Friday, there is no service on Links bus number 4. And perhaps under other business, if staff could just comment on our own transit system, that would be appreciated. And then the last is that for anybody who's interested, County Council, although I must say the work of the staff, which has been exceptional from the top of the leadership through all departments, carrying on the business of the county has been excellent, ensuring that essential services like paramedic, long-term care facilities, waste removal continue to operate as normal. They have done a wonderful job. But we as a council have in fact not actually met, and we will be doing so Tuesday, the 14th. That'll be our first meeting. And we will be using a similar service, well, not a similar, we will be using Zoom as well and be able to meet electronically. In terms of Councillor McLeod, I don't have the answer for you, and I apologize. There was a question as it relates to public participation. I know that residents locally were given an opportunity if they wanted to make a deputation, they could make a submission prior, and we had the 2 that came in. I don't know as it relates to the county. I'll follow up and I'll relay that to council. So those are my comments, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any questions? Councillor Berman, just keep singling you out just because we can't see you, Steve.
No, I'm good, thanks.
All right. So that brings us to 11.1, old or deferred business. Is there any old or deferred business tonight or this afternoon? Seeing none, other business. We have 11.2.1, an update on the Hurontario Street sidewalk and trees. Director Slama, Peggy, are you with us?
I am. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. I know it's been a long afternoon, so John and I will try and move through this quickly. This project update isn't related, isn't COVID related, but we've been receiving some questions on the plans for the Hurontario sidewalk. So we thought it was a good opportunity to give you an update. The sidewalk was added to the capital work project of intersection improvements at Hurontario and Lockhart Road and Campbell Street. Last fall, staff was directed to include a sidewalk from Lockhart Road south to Tracy Lane, with preference that it be a multi-use trail, which is a 3-meter wide trail. Staff noted at the time that this would require the removal of the existing trees or more of the existing trees, and it would be difficult to place new trees within that boulevard with the wider trail and accommodating the different cross-section utilities that would be being in place as well. So staff were then directed to replace the trees at a 2-to-1 ratio and looking for locations within the project area and also the surrounding neighborhood. So with this presentation, Manager Velek will provide council an update on how these requests have been accommodated within the project. Just before John begins to speak, I wanted to mention to council that though we're providing this update on this project today in response to council inquiries, at this time, we're not certain if this project will proceed in 2020. We have released the tender documents for the project. However, based on the provincial regulation that was released last Friday, the closure of places of non-essential businesses, and also the release of the updated list of exemptions to the regulation, we are reviewing which of our capital projects throughout the town we will be proceeding with in 2020. The list of exemptions does allow for some municipal projects to proceed, but we're just collectively going to look at the critical projects and determine which we deem would be appropriate to proceed with under these circumstances. So this Hurontario project will be given that same consideration. I wanted to also note for council that with the tender documents that have been released recently, we have modified them to include a contractor COVID-19 plan. We've asked for longer validity period for the pricing, and we've also increased the bonding. And these are just to help the municipality mitigate any potential risks. So with that, I'll pass it over to Manager Velek.
Thank you, Peggy. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Next slide, please. So in November of 2019, council asked that staff look into replacement of the trees on Hurontario at a ratio of 2-to-1. There's 59 existing trees that are slated for removal along Hurontario, so that would require 118 trees to be accommodated somewhere within the municipality. So we've taken a look at Hurontario Street, and we're only able to place 21 trees along that road. Next slide, please. So this is Hurontario within the work zone. We've placed as many trees as possible along the south side, given healthy spacing, and also neighboring trees that would be in conflict. We can't place any more along the north side due to the hydro lines. So we've had to look at other areas in town where we can put some extra trees. Next slide, please. So one of the areas is Finley Drive. It's in the vicinity of the work zone. It's fairly sparse the way it is now. There's a lot of opportunity to add boulevard trees along this road. So we're looking at putting in 46 trees along Finley, starting here at Saunders and heading easterly. Next slide, please. This is what we're proposing easterly from Saunders towards Newborn. As you can see, the trees switch from north south based on the location of the hydro lines. Next slide, please. And this is Finley easterly towards here, Ontario. Next slide, please. Another potential location for the trees would be Highway 26 East. We thought this would be a good location as it's a very busy corridor. This is the area that was just recently reconstructed by the MTO. This is just east of the Hume-Pretty River 26 intersection. So we're looking at some trees in front of the car wash, in front of the storage, and the vacant lands. Next slide, please. The final location we're proposing trees is at the Legion Park. It's pretty sparse there now, so we thought it would be a good candidate after speaking with the Parks Department. Next slide, please. So the other issue was with the sidewalk width. Council asked staff to look into the feasibility of installing a 3-meter wide sidewalk. So 3 meters is the kind of the minimum width required legally to allow cyclists to use the sidewalk along with pedestrians. Unfortunately, 2 meters is all that we can do on here, Ontario, and I'll show you on the next slide, please, why that is. So the existing boulevard along here, Ontario, is about 5 to 6 meters in total width. The distance between the roadway and the sidewalk to accommodate a tree is 2 meters. 2 meters is the minimum recommended width for a tree. It's also, we would want at least 2 meters or 1.5 meters to 2 meters for snow storage. And then on the other side of the sidewalk, we're allowing 1 to 2 meter buffer between the sidewalk and the fence. There's a lot of, on the property line, there are a lot of fences along this corridor, and we don't want the sidewalk too close, and that, so that the snow plow, the sidewalk plow would push snow up against the fence and damage the fences. So 2 meters is really the maximum we can do in this corridor. And that's all I have for you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, John. Council, any questions or comments?
I have a quick question.
Yes. Was that Deputy Mayor? Who spoke out there? Sorry, I didn't see that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Just thank you very much to both for the presentation. Very quickly, the vacant land that is directly to the east of Hyundai, that property was clear cut. I want to suggest maybe about 2013. There was going to be a business from Barrie that was expanding an auto shop, I believe. I'm just wondering, so the trees that you're proposing there, if that land was future developed, or the developer who was going to be developing it, would they have been responsible for tree planting there to a similar number that you're suggesting?
They would be, through the mayor, they would be responsible for some planting on their property. Generally, depends on the site, but generally we require landscaping within the private property only. There have been exceptions, but generally it's only within private property.
Any follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
No, I just, that's great. I wasn't sure how far those setbacks were from the provincial highway. So that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, Council? Councilor Berman, I know I keep bugging you, but I can't see you. take that as a negative.
No, I'm I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Any other business, council? Councillor McLeod.
I actually have a whole lot of questions about things that were discussed in our meeting on March the 25th that I'm hoping to have a bit of an update on them. And I think now is the time to do that. Is that correct?
Go ahead. If we can't answer them now, then we will get to the questions or the answers later.
Super.
Go ahead.
So through your worship, we had some conversations recently regarding the Out of the Cold program and the extra support that the town has delivered there too. And I am not entirely sure that I know where that particular money came from. Is it from the emergency fund that we approved on March 25th?
My understanding is we drew that down from the pre-approved budget line item for the Out of the Cold program for 2020. But I'll look to the CAO or the treasurer to confirm that.
Through your worship, yeah, that's the line item from which the money came.
And so, but we'd already approved that money in the budget. So this was extra money?
No, it just was prepaid down out of that amount. I think we'd approved $75,000 again, so we pulled part of that down. So it was $10,500, my understanding, and so we pulled that out of the 75,000, and the hope being that we'll get compensated for that, and we're keeping tabs of all the monies that have been spent on the COVID-19, and we'll be able to replenish that budget, and if not, then we'll have to look at that going into next year.
Terrific. Thank you so much. My next question is about capital projects in light of COVID-19 and further to what Director Slama had to say regarding getting the work done on here Ontario Street and having a COVID-ready construction crew, which is fantastic. I'm curious to know about several of the capital projects. We have quite an ambitious capital program this year, $50 million, as far as I can remember from our budget talks. So I'm curious to know where we are at when it comes to Fisher Field and the splash pad and the Sunset Point Park projects, and also the repairs at Sunset Point. And also I had a question from a resident regarding the construction project for Napier Street. So maybe we could start with that one, because I understand that with the province has said that infrastructure projects like that can go forward, but other construction projects are supposed to be going on hold. So that's the genesis of my question. And I guess it's through you, your worship, to the CIO, or perhaps to Director Culver.
Well, I guess I think we'll answer the last one first, which was the Napier Street project. So I don't know if CIO wanted to take that, or John or Peggy.
So I think on all the construction projects, your worship, the province has revised its emergency list, and we're taking a look at it. All the capital projects will be on hold until further notice, and we will provide an update to council when we plan on restarting this project. But as of now, the intention is to put all these projects on hold until we've got a better sense of where we are vis-a-vis the COVID-19 pandemic.
And that includes Napier Street, yes?
That includes all capital projects.
Thank you so much. I'll be sure to get back to my constituent with that answer. I also would like to know whether we have empowered our bylaw officers as allowed by the province to break up groups of larger than 5 that are congregating at places in town and enforce the social distancing. And if so, how many tickets have we put out yet?
I'd have to look to Adam Farr or Greg Miller for that answer. Are they with us? Do you know, CAO?
Through your, I think Adam is on the line, so maybe Adam can answer that question.
Yes, Mayor Saunderson, we have not issued any tickets. We're working in tandem with the OPP and Simcoe County Health Unit to encourage people to disperse when they're found to be congregating in larger groups. And in fact, we've happened upon those groups. The public has generally been responsive to encouragement, and we're seeing general compliance.
So we owe them, there's $1
Thank
million
you.
that we got.
And sorry, Your Worship, I just want to clarify the response I just provided to Councillor Hamlin. I was making reference to new capital projects, because there are projects that have been underway when this COVID-19 crisis pandemic happened. So what I was referring to were new capital projects or capital projects that haven't been started. I just want to make sure that there's some clarity around that. Thanks.
Thank you. Other question that I have is directly basically from the minutes of our meeting on March the 25th, wherein it was discussed that the budget would be kept a close eye on regarding expenditures that were not going to be taking place and whether they could be reincorporated into our emergency fund. And I'm thinking about the 28 part-time people who were not hired for the summer, and also the events that are not going to be taking place this summer, and the crossing guards, I think, who were sent home. Has that money been accounted for, and is it going into the emergency fund?
CAO?
Through Your Worship, it's premature and it's way too early for us to start counting those funds and put that money anywhere. We need to also realize that there's going to be some revenue loss associated with some of these programs not happening as well. So while expenditures might be reduced in certain instances, there's some revenue gaps that would need to be filled. So it would be premature for us to start putting money or taking money out of line items and placing them elsewhere. I think we'd have to give ourselves some flexibility and wait until we see what's happening on the COVID-19 front before we begin to do that. The other consideration I posit for Council's information as well is that there are going to be some extraordinary expenses that we're going to be faced with as a municipality. For example, we've got staff who might be working from home and have to incur expenses due to that. So some of the money that we save in one area, we may have to look at reallocating some of that to fill the gaps elsewhere. So we promise Council that we will be taking a look at the budget in light of COVID-19, and we will do that. At this stage in the game, I think it would be way too premature for us to start reallocating funds without having a better picture of where we were going vis-a-vis COVID-19 and what impact it is going to have not only on the expenditure side, but also on the revenue side.
Thank you very much. You actually answered one of my questions prior to my asking it, because my next question was regarding revenue deferrals from our arenas and our pool and pitches and so on. So I think that brings me to the end of my list. Thank you very much.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just a couple of things that have come up for me. One resident had asked about being able to close some of here Ontario Street, kind of between the intersections of 4th and 3rd, 3rd and 2nd, and 2nd and 1st, because some of the businesses, banking and otherwise, have a queuing situation happening, and the social distancing that is required might be assisted if we were able to, during the day or some kind of core time during the day, be able to provide more space for the queuing and the social distancing as pedestrians move up and down. So I thought it was an idea maybe worth considering, and I just simply bring that up for consideration, maybe by staff or whatever processes they have for those kinds of requests. The second one actually came up through my FCM call, and with the children having to be able to access and doing at-home learning or learning on internet, we have families in our municipality who don't have access to internet at their home for whatever reasons. And the way some of these other municipalities are dealing with it is by providing access to public internet, i.e. in their library parking lot or other public facilities. They're also asking businesses. So I'm not sure if we have the bandwidth or the capability, but I think for people who don't have access to the internet, I know the MP's office was referring them to the library. Well, the library is closed. And I think if we have that ability, even for people to update themselves on some of the things related to COVID, it would also be a good service to be able to supply. So I think that's just it from me in terms of some creative ways that people are thinking about solving some problems on the ground.
I think Councillor Jeffrey, as staff will look into particularly the latter one to make sure that our kids are getting access to what they need. Thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my question for staff is, we completed our budget discussions in December, and I know for various reasons our staff been very busy, mostly last couple of weeks. But I have been asked when our budget will be, I guess it's pulled together after all our deliberations and posted online. And I'm just wondering when that document would be available.
CAO or Marjorie? Treasurer, who wants to respond to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll ask Marjorie to respond.
Okay, through you, Your Worship. We have got all of the figures together, and we're just PDFing, putting the files into PDF and making sure the formatting is all right. So it should be next week. At the very latest, it would be next Friday. I would hope it would be Wednesday or so next week.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much.
Any other business? Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion. So I suppose the first thing I have to do is request to waive notice. And I suppose I could let everybody know what I'd like to propose. And what I'd like to propose is that council authorize $500 out of the contingency fund to be provided to each of our publicly funded high schools for their COVID-related food programs. And I'd like to put that out there, and I'd like that to happen before the end of this meeting.
Okay, so I'll look for a seconder for the motion, and that is Councillor McLeod. So first we'll call on a waiving notice of motion. I got to go through the list. So we will start that with Councillor Comey. You vote, Councillor Comey.
In favor.
And Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I'm in favor. Deputy Mayor.
In favor.
Councillor McLeod.
In favor.
All right, that is carried unanimously. So you can put the motion on the table, Councillor Comey.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to thank Clerk Almas very much for her assistance. That council herein authorizes $500 to be provided to each publicly funded high school. So my intention is on the CCI food program and program that Vanier has pulled together, and that to come from $500 to be provided each of the publicly funded high schools from the contingency fund for their COVID-19 related needs for their food programs.
And maybe Councillor Comey, since the schools are closed, you could just explain to us how that's going to affect the students on the ground.
I can explain to you the best of my understanding. I'm sure if Director Culver's still on, vis-a-vis Jennifer Parker, and I think CEO Amin is aware, and they've had many calls about this. So we know that CCI is got what they call their backpack program up and running again. And that's a unique program that operates through donations, because they include a variety of foods that might not be available traditionally at the food bank. So fresh foods and dairy. And right now, best, again, from my understanding, I'm sure there's many others with better details. The Catholic High School Vanier is doing is pulling together something similar, is the best I can put it. And they have a limited amount of funding available to them now, but they're certainly looking for more. And again, this would be to support the students that would normally receive meals and breakfast program support when the schools are open. And of course, we know that they're not.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you to Councillor Comey, I'm just trying to understand how this works. So is this a donation to allow the programs to get up and running when the students are back at school, or is this something for the students to access right now?
Councillor Comey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Dorley. So they are delivering food now. This is because the schools are closed. Normally the students have access to food at the school during the day. And I believe the paper did an article on this as well. They're already on the ground running, delivering food. And further to the comments I made earlier, again, under the COVID issue, the virus issue, the more we can do, my opinion, to support them not having to run around through the community to solicit donations, not having to go door to door to pick up grocery cards or granola bars. In my opinion, the better. Let's help them have, let's assist them financially so it will limit their need to go around the community picking up donations, be it a monetary donation or a food donation. So it's an active program happening now as a result of COVID and the schools being closed.
All right. Any other questions or comments, Council? Seeing none, I will call the vote, and we'll start with you, Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
Councillor Berman.
In favor.
Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor.
I am in favor. Deputy Mayor.
In favor.
And Councillor McLeod.
In favor.
All right, that is carried unanimously. And Sarah, you'll have to write that up because I don't have the written record of that one. Any other business, Council? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I had a quick question and quick comment. So the question was just to follow up on the bus service. So through you to staff, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we're currently operating on the Sunday schedule, but what's the schedule for the coming weekend if it's modified?
John Bellick, are you there?
I'm here,
Peggy.
Mayor Saunderson. Yeah.
Yeah, hi Peggy.
Hi, Mayor Saunderson. So through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Hall, currently our plan is to stay with the Sunday schedule. We're seeing a ridership is about 1/3 of what it usually is. And that's our plan today.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Director Slama. And then the comment was just, again, in terms of things, how they're evolving, just as we were coming on the air, the Premier had announced that on the weekend, grocery stores will be mandated to close. And I could have my facts wrong, so I encourage people to actually look up the details so that they get the correct information, but definitely closed on Good Friday. And the reason I mention that is because in our area, being sort of known as a tourist community, our grocery stores are oftentimes open when they are closed in other communities. So I encourage people to make sure that they, follow up. It's been interesting to know, some of you know, I've got a son who works at a grocery store and they're changing their hours. So for example, he works at Sobeys. They've been closing at 8 o'clock for the last week, I guess. And it's interesting when I go to pick him up, the number of people who are literally arriving thinking that the store would be still open till 10. They then have now opened last night. I think they're open again tonight, tomorrow, until 10 o'clock in an effort to be able to accommodate what they anticipate will be an increase in the number of people grocery shopping for the Easter weekend. So please, we all need groceries. Take the time to determine what hours of operation your favorite store is operating so that you're not left and also so that you're not rushing and putting unnecessary due pressure on those who are working front lines within the food industry, the grocery stores.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other business? Final call. Seeing none, the next we have on the agenda is the confirmatory bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Madigan, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved, the bylaw number 2020-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held, it's not regular, it's special meeting of council held April 8, 2020 be enacted and passed this 8th day of April 2020. And I'll start first with you, Councillor Berman.
No, I bet you never would have come to me once today if there'd just been a little heart monitor on the screen for me. But I will, I'll approve.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Berman. Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor?
I'm in favor. Deputy Mayor.
In favor?
Councillor McLeod.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
In favor.
And Councillor Doherty.
In favor.
That is carried unanimously. So all we need now is a motion to adjourn. Councillor Jeffrey. I gotta go through this again. Okay, we'll start with Councillor Jeffrey.
In favor.
Councillor Hamlin.
In favor?
I'm in favor. Deputy Mayor.
In favor?
Councillor McLeod.
In favor.
Councillor Comey.
In favor.
Councillor Madigan.
Yes, sir.
Councillor Doherty, and we're going to end with you, Councillor Berman.
In favor.
In favor.
Good, you get final say, Councillor Berman. And that is it, folks. That was a good discussion. Thanks very much. And we will be talking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how to leave.
It's in the bottom corner. If you're on a desktop,
Stop
it should be in
leaving.
red.
Oh, okay, thank you.